Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on the show. Today's great quote in franchising comes from Tom Scarda, and Tom is a franchise consultant for FranChoice, and he's the author of The Magic of Choosing Uncertainty. And we've had Tom on this show 2 times over the last 14 years, and Tom is great at providing analogies on topics like motivation and entrepreneurship. So today's great quote in franchising is called "It Doesn't Hurt Enough." We'll let Tom explain why.
10 years with FranChoice, helping them to find businesses. And what I find, and you know this from the industry, is that majority of people who look at franchising do not buy a franchise. And the number one reason is fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So they go, instead of choosing, at the end of the process, you know, they're looking at great companies because we vet them, we know who's good, who's not, and you can never deny that the companies are not good when you go down the road at looking at them.
Right.
The choice is not what franchise to buy. The choice is the choice between uncertainty and unhappiness.
That's interesting.
And most people go back to the unhappiness, and because there's a comfort in that, right? So at least I get a paycheck. At least I know I have a job. At least I can pay my bills. And I got to tell you, if you think you're on this earth to pay your bills, you're always going to have a mild kind of frustration that goes through your life.
It's very powerful. You know what you said, Tom. You know, We've seen that on the show too. You know, I mean, I've heard numbers like at like 1 out of 100 people will say yes to going the franchise alternative, or they'll give some kind of like excuse, like well, it's not perfect. And I remember you even saying this a long time ago, is there's not really that always that perfect opportunity. You know what I mean? I mean, there's always. I think the analogy you used a long time ago was, even when you buy a house, you know what I mean? There's always going to be something with that house that you can always fix. You know what I mean? So there's never that perfect opportunity, and I suspect you get that from a lot of people because they're so terrified of going forward. There's like, well, I don't think this is the perfect opportunity for me. I suspect you probably get that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, and you're right. I think it was in Joe Matthews' great book, Street Smart Franchising.
Yeah.
He talks about that. 1 out of every 100 people that look at franchising actually buy a franchise, and that the thing for me, Marty, is it makes me sad inside, because I talk to these folks that have great backgrounds, they're phenomenal at what they do, and they can easily translate their skills into their own business and really live happily ever after, and they don't, and it's always because of fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. You use a powerful word, Tom. You used happy, and I think it's interesting that how many people there are out there that are, working day to day, and they're just, as you said, they're paying their bills, but they're not happy, are they? And I know a lot of those people who are working for, let's say, the city, and they're going to get their pension at some point, but they just aren't happy. And I can't imagine working 40 years and not being happy, and you wonder, it's really that powerful, and that's why I think your book is so important. The magic of choosing uncertainty is that you lived it, haven't you? I mean, I'm sure you've been through all of those things that a lot of your clients certainly have going through their head, don't they?
Yeah, I've been in their shoes. And that's why I kind of enjoy I love what I do, because I'm really able to speak to people on a one-to-one basis that, I not only have empathy, I've been there, I've done it, and maybe it's not for everybody, and that's fine. I get that. Not everybody should buy a franchise, believe me.
Right.
But but when you're there and you're on the cusp, and it's the 11th hour and you have to make a decision, and you run away from it, it's really, really sad. And from my perspective, it is, and I think from their perspective, I just read an article last week that said 86% of Americans want to change their job today.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I think it was
86%.
86% of Americans want to change their job today. and probably maybe 1% will, get out of the corporate rat race. A lot of people will change jobs, and they're going from, one fire to another fire, and they really don't solve anything. But I'll tell you that, a great story that I share with everybody, and I think that it will go very, very well here. If you can imagine for a second, there's these two guys sitting on a porch, like two old hillbillies, right? And they're drinking their sarsaparilla, and they're rocking in their rocking chairs. And one of them has a hound dog, and the hound dog's sitting on the floor. And every once in a while, that hound dog lets out a yelp.
Yeah.
So one of these guys, one guy says to the other guy with the dog, "What's wrong with your dog?" And he said, "Nothing's wrong with the dog." So he said, "Well, why does he yelp like that?"
Yeah.
And he said, "He's laying on a nail." And he said, "Well, why doesn't he get off the nail?" And he said, "Well, I guess it just doesn't hurt bad enough."
Wow. That's a great analogy. We're going to have to use it. We have this great quotes in franchising podcast. We're going to have to put that one in there. I haven't heard you tell that story, but I think that's I mean that's a great one. I mean, it does show how we're willing to live our lives like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It frustrates the heck out of me. And in the book, I give people what I call fuel for change, which are different exercises at the end of a couple of different chapters where you can go through changing your mindset about things.
Yeah.
And you realize after a while, all your stuff, all your baggage in that fear department essentially comes from your parents and from your upbringing telling you, no, don't do that, be careful, and if you lose, you're a loser. And that's not the case at all, because when you take a chance and if it doesn't work out for some reason, there's more life lessons in that failure than there is in any success. And I can tell you that directly from my smoothie experience.
Sure.
There's so much more to learn when you're trying to climb out of a hole than standing on top of a hill.
Yeah, and it's it must be interesting. I'm one of those people, as I mentioned, Tom. My mom is still waiting for me to go apply for the post office. I said I'm going to be 50 years old in 3 years. And I just recently completed my doctorate degree last year, and I think she's still waiting for me to go work for the post office. She just tried to instill that in me as a kid, and maybe that was my reason I went the other direction. It just didn't seem gratifying to me, not to pick on anyone who works for the post office, but I wouldn't have had that. And I love the word you use. You use this word fuel, and we had the great Michael Gerber on our show, and I know you're a fan of his as well.
If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Tom Scarda, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com. You can go to our franchises listed alphabetically page, and you can find Tom Scarda there. Or you can go to franchise interviews listed by category, and you can go to our franchise experts page and listen to the interview there. And finally, we just want to thank everyone for making this Great Quotes in Franchising podcast such a big hit. And we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising from Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.